A millionaire gave food to triplets in a downtown square on Christmas Eve, and the next day, 3 police officers knocked on the door of his mansion. The clock in the imposing mansion struck 9 times, the sound echoing through the empty hallways. John Matthews, 60 years old, a renowned millionaire and philanthropist, stared at his own reflection in the ornate mirror of the entrance hall. Deep wrinkles lined his face, silent witnesses to a life filled with business success, but also growing loneliness. "Another Christmas Eve alone," he murmured, adjusting his silk tie. His once vibrant blue eyes now seemed dull under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Suddenly, an idea hit him like lightning. Why spend the night surrounded by cold walls when he could make a difference out there? "Jenkins," John called, his voice reverberating through the house. The butler appeared almost instantly. "Yes, sir. Prepare baskets of food, lots of food. I'm going to hand them out at the main town square." Jenkins hesitated. "But sir, there's snow, and the guests expected for tomorrow's dinner." John interrupted him with a gesture. "Cancel everything. Tonight, we'll do something that truly matters." Half an hour later, John was driving his Bentley through deserted streets, the back seat crammed with baskets. Snow fell gently, creating an almost magical scene in stark contrast to a reality he knew existed in the city's shadows. When he reached the square, John's heart tightened. Solitary figures were huddled on benches, fighting against the biting cold. He began distributing the baskets, each a thank you, warming his heart a little more. That's when he saw them. 3 young women, nearly identical, crowded together on a bench, visibly trembling. Their eyes, although tired, shone with a spark of hope, despair. John could not decipher. Approaching carefully, he offered a basket. "Hello. I thought you might use this." The tallest of the 3, none looked older than 20, studied him with a mix of gratitude and distrust. "Thank you, sir. This is very kind." As the young women devoured the food, John couldn't help noticing their injured fingers, their worn-out clothes, the furtive glances around them. Something about them sparked an intense curiosity in him. "I'm Jonda," he said, sitting at the edge of the bench. "And you are?" The tallest swallowed a piece of bread before answering. "Yeah, Emma. These are my sisters, Olivia and Ava." John nodded, noting how Olivia cringed slightly at the sound of her name, while Ava barely lifted her eyes from the food. "Triplets, then? That's fascinating. And what brings 3 young women to this bench on Christmas Eve?" Emma exchanged a quick glance with her sisters before replying, "So it's complicated, sir." John sensed there was much more to their story than they were willing to share. A vulnerability in their eyes, tension in their shoulders, all screamed that these young women were running from something or someone. "I understand," he said softly. "Sometimes life takes us to unexpected places." At that moment, Ava, the smallest of the 3, let out a violent sneeze, her frail body trembling with the effort. John made an instant decision. "Look, I know you don't know me, but I have a large, empty house not far from here. Why not spend the night there? No obligations, just a warm place to sleep." The triplets exchanged loaded glances. It was Olivia who spoke, her voice low but firm. "Why would you do this for us?" John smiled, feeling an inexplicable connection with these young women. "Let's just say it's my Christmas present to myself. Some company and a chance to do something good." There was a tense silence, broken only by the distant sound of Christmas bells. Finally, Emma nodded. "All right, Mr. John, we accept your offer." As he guided the young women to his car, John could not help but notice how they moved. Always together, always alert. There was a story there, one he was determined to uncover. What John did not know, as he drove back to his mansion with the triplets, was that this simple act of kindness was about to plunge him into a web of secrets, dangers, and emotions that would change his life forever. When they arrived at the mansion, the Christmas lights glowed softly, casting dancing shadows over the snow. John watched the young women's amazed expressions and felt a wave of protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. "Welcome to your home for the night," he said, opening the door. Emma, Olivia, and Ava entered hesitantly, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. John could not help but notice how Ava clung to Olivia's hand, or how Emma positioned herself slightly in front, as if ready to protect her sisters at any cost. As he guided them inside, John felt he was on the brink of something monumental. Who were these young women really? What were they running from? And why did he feel such a desperate need to help them? The mansion's doors closed behind them, shutting out the world outside. But for John and the triplets, a new journey was just beginning, a journey that promised to uncover buried secrets, test limits, and perhaps redefine the meaning of family. The clock struck midnight. It was officially Christmas. And in that once cold and lonely mansion, the warmth of compassion and the chill of mystery intertwined, promising a story none of them would ever forget. The fire crackled in the living room's fireplace, casting dancing shadows on John's mansion walls. The triplets, Emma, Olivia, and Ava, sat tensely on the leather sofa, their hands clasped together as if they feared being separated at any moment. John observed the young women, noting every nervous movement, every furtive glance. "You are safe here," he said softly, offering cups of hot chocolate. "You can tell me how you ended up in that square." Emma, clearly the group's spokesperson, took a deep breath before beginning. "Our mother, she passed away 3 months ago." Her voice trembled slightly. "Cancer. She fought for 2 years, but..." Olivia continued, her voice almost a whisper. "We had no one else, no other relatives. And then the orphanage," Ava completed, speaking for the first time, her eyes filling with tears. John felt his heart tighten. "I'm so sorry for your loss. The orphanage was not a good experience, I take it." The three sisters exchanged meaningful looks before Emma continued. Flashback. The day they arrived at St. Mary's orphanage was etched into the triplets' memory. The grey, run-down building seemed to swallow them whole. Inside, the smell of mold and cheap disinfectant was suffocating. "3 at once, aren't I lucky?" muttered the director, Mrs. Harker, a woman with a severe face and cold eyes. "Put them in room 13 and don't expect any special treatment just because they're triplets." The days dragged on in a brutal routine. Waking at 5 a.m., cold showers, heavy chores, poor lessons, and scarce food. At night, lying in their cramped bunk beds, the sisters whispered promises to stay together, no matter what. But the worst part was the abuse. Staff members shouting for any reason, physical punishments for minor infractions, and the constant fear of being separated. "If this continues, I'll have you sent to different homes," Mrs. Harker frequently threatened. One particularly cold night, Emma, the eldest by 5 minutes, made a decision. "We need to get out of here," she whispered to her sisters. The plan was meticulously devised over weeks. Ava, quieter and more observant, mapped the staff's routines. Olivia, a strategist, planned the escape route. Emma led, keeping her sisters focused and hopeful. On the chosen night, hearts pounding, they waited until everyone was asleep. Moving silently, they slipped out the back window, using knotted bed sheets as a makeshift rope. The cold wind of freedom hit them as soon as they stepped outside the orphanage's walls. They ran through the night, hand in hand, tears of fear and relief streaming down their faces. End of flashback. John listened attentively, his face a mask of compassion and indignation. "How did you survive after that?" Ava, gaining confidence, explained. "We slept in shelters when we could, or in abandoned buildings. We took on small odd jobs, cleaning, handing out flyers, anything to get food." Olivia added, "It was hard. Many nights we went hungry, but we were together, and that was what mattered most." Emma concluded, "Until tonight, when you found us. Honestly, Mr. John, I don't know how much longer we could have lasted." John fell silent for a moment, absorbing their story. His mind drifted to his own past, John's flashback. A young John, newly graduated and full of ambition, walked through a poor neighborhood. He saw an elderly lady struggling with grocery bags. Without hesitation, he offered help. The gratitude in her eyes touched him deeply. At that moment, John made a promise to himself to use his wealth and influence to help those in need. End of John's flashback. Returning to the present, John looked at the triplets. He saw not only their suffering, but also extraordinary strength and resilience. He felt an inexplicable connection, as if destiny had orchestrated their meeting. "You are incredible," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've been through so much and you're still here, together, fighting." The young women seemed surprised by the compliment, as if they weren't used to hearing kind words. John stood, walking over to a window. Snow continued to fall outside, creating a white, silent world. He made a decision he knew would change his life forever. Turning to the triplets, he said, "I know we've just met, and you have every reason to be wary, but I'd like to offer you something more than just one night of shelter." The sisters looked at him with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Stay here, not just tonight, but as long as you need. I have the space, the resources, and I can help you rebuild your lives. No pressure, no obligations, just a chance." The silence that followed seemed to weigh a ton. The triplets looked at each other, a silent conversation passing among them. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice choked with emotion. "Mr. John, we don't know how to thank you." Olivia, always more cautious, asked, "Are you sure? You barely know us." John smiled gently. "Sometimes, life gives us unexpected opportunities to make a difference. This is mine, and maybe yours too." Ava, the youngest, suddenly stood and, to everyone's surprise, hugged John. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, in that room warmed by the fireplace and compassion, something changed. A new family, improbable and unexpected, began to form. John knew there would be challenges ahead, legal issues, adjustment, building trust. But looking at the three young women in front of him, he felt a certainty he hadn't experienced in years. "Well," he said, a genuine smile lighting up his face, "I guess we have a lot to talk about. How about we start with a tour of the house? After all, this is your home now, for as long as you want." The triplets rose, still holding hands, but now with a spark of hope in their eyes. As they followed John out of the room, each of them felt that, for the first time in a long while, the future did not seem so frightening. The mansion, once cold and lonely, now seemed to pulse with new life. Christmas, after all, had brought an unexpected miracle to them all. Christmas morning dawned calmly over John Matthews' mansion. The sun filtered through heavy curtains, casting a gentle glow over silent hallways. John woke up early, as usual, and went down to the kitchen, where the aroma of fresh coffee already filled the air. "Good morning, Mr. Matthews," greeted Mrs. Thompson, his longtime housekeeper. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Margaret," John replied, noticing a barely concealed curiosity in her eyes. "Our guests are still asleep." "Yes, sir. I haven't heard any movement in the guest rooms," John nodded, taking his cup of coffee. Last night seemed almost like a dream now. Had he really brought three young strangers into his home? The weight of the responsibility he'd assumed began to press on him. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of soft footsteps. Emma, Olivia, and Ava entered the kitchen, still wearing the borrowed clothes John had given them the previous night. Their eyes were wide, a mixture of sleepiness and apprehension. "Good morning, girls," John smiled, trying to ease the palpable tension. "Merry Christmas. I hope you slept well." Emma, as always, took the lead. "Yes, Mr. John. Thank you again for everything." Mrs. Thompson glanced from John to the triplets, eyebrows raised in a silent question. John made a subtle gesture, indicating he would explain later. "How about a proper Christmas breakfast?" he suggested, guiding the young women to the dining room. As they ate waffles, eggs, and fresh fruit, John observed the triplets. Despite the obvious comfort, they still seemed tense, as if expecting everything to vanish at any moment. "So," John began, trying to start a light conversation, "what did you usually do for Christmas when—" His sentence was cut short by loud knocking at the front door. The sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. The triplets froze, their faces turning pale instantly. Ava dropped her fork, the metallic clink shattering the sudden silence. "Who could that be?" John murmured, more to himself than the others. Standing up, he walked to the main door, aware of the anxious eyes following him. Upon opening it, he found three imposing figures, 2 men and a woman, all in police uniforms. "Good morning, sir," said the tallest man, his voice deep and authoritative. I'm Detective Michael Lawson. These are my colleagues, Detective Sarah Collins and Officer David Chen. We'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. John felt his heart race but maintained composure. Of course, detectives. How can I help you this Christmas morning? Detective Lawson's piercing gaze seemed to search beyond John, as if trying to see inside the house. We received information that you may be sheltering 3 young runaways. In the dining room, the triplets heard the conversation. Panic spread among them like fire. Olivia gripped her sister's hands, eyes wide with terror. "They found us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Emma, always the protector, stood up. "We have to get out of here." Now. But before they could move, they heard John's voice. "Girls, could you come here, please?" John's calm tone contrasted with the turmoil of emotions the triplets felt. Reluctantly, they headed to the front door, each step feeling like an eternity. Seeing them arrive, John immediately noted the fear in their eyes. Turning to the officers, he spoke firmly. "Before we continue this conversation, I'd like to know exactly what these young women are being accused of." Detective Lawson frowned. "Sir, these young women escaped from a state-run orphanage 3 months ago. They are minors under state guardianship. We're here to take them back." The words fell like a weight upon them all. Ava let out a muffled sob, while Olivia and Emma positioned protectively in front of her. John, feeling the triplets' anguish, decided to take a stand. "Detectives, I understand the situation, but I ask that you hear me out. These young women have been through a lot. The orphanage they fled from, well, I have reason to believe it wasn't a safe place." Detective Sarah Collins, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. Her gaze was softer than her colleagues. "Mr. Matthews, we understand your concern, but there are procedures to follow. We can't simply ignore—" "I know," John interrupted, his voice full of determination. "Taz, but I ask that you give me a chance to explain the situation fully. These girls aren't criminals. They are victims of circumstances beyond their control." Officer Chen, the youngest of the 3, seemed uncomfortable with the situation. Maybe we could hear what Mr. Matthews has to say," he suggested, looking at his superiors. Detective Lawson looked ready to protest, but Detective Collins nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Matthews, we'll hear your side of the story." John felt momentary relief. Turning to the triplets, he said softly, "It's okay. Nobody's taking you anywhere without us having a chance to explain everything. Do you trust me?" The 3 sisters exchanged quick glances before Emma replied, "Yes, Mr. John, we trust you." With a nod, John invited the officers inside. As he guided the group into the living room, his mind raced furiously. He knew the next few hours would be crucial. He would need all his influence, persuasion, and compassion to protect the triplets. Looking at Emma, Olivia, and Ava, John saw fear in their eyes, but also a spark of hope. He made a silent promise to himself and to them. No matter what happened, he would protect them. He would not allow them to be sent back to a life of abuse and neglect. The living room door closed behind them, isolating them from the outside world. John prepared himself for the most important battle of his life. A battle not for money or power, but for the future of 3 young women who, in less than 24 hours, had become incredibly important to him. The clock on the wall read 10:30 a.m. The conversation about to unfold would change the course of many lives. And in that mansion, on that Christmas morning, the destiny of the triplets and of John was about to be decided. Tension was palpable in the luxurious living room of John Matthews. The triplets, Emma, Olivia, and Ava, sat together on a sofa, their hands intertwined in mutual support. John occupied a nearby armchair, his body leaning slightly forward, as if forming a protective barrier between the young women and the 3 officers seated before them. Detective Michael Lawson cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. "Mr. Matthews, we understand that your intentions were to help, but the situation is more complex than it seems." John nodded gravely. "I'm aware of that, Detective. Please, explain exactly what's going on." Detective Sarah Collins opened a folder she carried. Emma, Olivia, and Ava Pearson, 18 years old, were reported missing 3 months ago by St. Mary's Orphanage. She paused, her eyes shifting from the triplets to John. As they were legally under state guardianship after their mother's death, Officer David Chen added, his voice gentler. There was an extensive search for them. Mr. Matthews, many resources were mobilized to find them. John felt a pang in his chest. His act of kindness, which seemed so right the previous night, now revealed itself loaded with legal complications. I understand the gravity of the situation, he said carefully, but I would like you to hear their side before making any decisions. Detective Lawson frowned. Mr. Matthews, I appreciate your concern, but you must understand the position you're putting yourself in. Sheltering runaway minors, even with good intentions, can have serious legal consequences. Emma, the bravest of the triplets, spoke up. Please, don't make us go back there. Her voice trembled, but there was determination in her eyes. That place is not safe for us, Olivia, ever cautious, added. We know running away was illegal, but we had no choice. What happened in that orphanage? Ava, quieter, simply lowered her head, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Detective Lawson looked about to interrupt, but Detective Collins raised a hand, silencing him. Girls, you're making serious accusations. Can you tell us more? John watched as the triplets exchanged quick looks before Emma continued. There was abuse, physical and emotional. No one listened to us. When we tried to tell, we were punished. The room fell silent for a moment, Emma's words hanging heavily in the air. John felt a mix of rage and sadness welling inside him. How could such things happen? Officer Chen, visibly disturbed by the revelations, asked gently, Do you have any proof of these allegations? Olivia answered, her voice low but firm. We have scars and nightmares, but most of the evidence was left behind when we escaped. John, feeling the need to intervene, said, Detectives, officers, I know you're just doing your jobs, but I ask that you consider what you're hearing. These girls have suffered significant trauma. Sending them back to the source of that trauma would be, well, it would be cruel. Detective Lawson seemed conflicted. Mr. Matthews, I understand your concern, but you must realize the position you're in. What you've done, what you're doing, isn't exactly legal. It was then that Detective Michaelin, who had remained silent, observing closely, spoke. Maybe there's a middle ground here. All eyes turned to him, curious. Michael continued, his tone measured and thoughtful. Mr. Matthews, you have a respectable reputation as a philanthropist. Your actions, though technically illegal, clearly come from a place of compassion. He paused, looking at the triplets. And you, girls, have made very serious accusations that can't be ignored. John felt a glimmer of hope. What are you suggesting, Detective? Michael leaned forward, his eyes sweeping the room. I propose this. The girls remain here, under Mr. Matthews' supervision, while we conduct a full investigation into the orphanage's allegations. This will give us time to verify everyone's stories and ensure we're making the right decision. Detective Collins nodded slowly. This could work. We'd have to set clear guidelines, of course. Detective Lawson seemed less convinced. This is unprecedented. We don't have the authority to... We have the authority to ensure the safety of potential victims, Michael interrupted firmly. If there's a chance these accusations are true, we have a duty to investigate before taking any hasty action. John felt deep respect for Detective Michael at that moment. Here was someone willing to look beyond rigid rules and see the bigger picture. The triplets looked at each other, a mix of hope and disbelief on their faces. Emma spoke first. This would mean we don't have to go back there, at least for now. Michael nodded. Exactly. But you'd have to fully cooperate with our investigation, and Mr. Matthews, you would be taking on a great responsibility. John did not hesitate. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to ensure their safety and well-being. Detective Lawson let out a heavy sigh. This goes against all protocols, but, given the exceptional nature of the situation, I'm willing to consider it. The next hour was spent discussing the arrangement's details. John agreed to become the girl's temporary guardian, subject to regular visits from social services. The girls agreed to provide detailed statements about their experiences at the orphanage. The detectives committed to conducting a thorough and impartial investigation. When the officers finally stood to leave, the air in the room felt lighter, despite the situation's seriousness. Detective Michael was the last to head for the door. Before leaving, he turned to John and the triplets. "You're embarking on a difficult journey," he said, his tone serious but compassionate. "There will be challenges ahead. But if what you say is true, this may be the first step toward correcting a great wrong. I'll be watching closely." After the officers departed, John turned to the triplets. Their faces were a mix of relief, fear, and hope. "Well," he said, trying to inject a bit of lightness into his voice, "it seems we'll have company longer than we initially expected." Ava, surprising everyone, was the first to react. She stood up, and tears in her eyes, hugged John. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing in us." Emma and Olivia soon joined the embrace, and John found himself at the center of a group hug, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had just assumed, but also a fierce determination to protect these young women, no matter the cost. As the living room clock struck noon, John realized that this Christmas marked not only the start of a new journey for him and the triplets, but possibly the start of something far bigger. A chance to expose injustices, heal deep wounds, and maybe redefine the meaning of family. The road ahead would be difficult, full of legal and emotional obstacles, but looking into the triplets' eyes, John knew every challenge would be worth it. Together, they would face whatever came, one day at a time. The days following the officer's visit were a whirlwind of activity at John Matthews' mansion. With the triplets now under his temporary care, John was determined to uncover the truth about St. Mary's orphanage and the girls' experiences. On a cold January morning, John found himself in his study, the phone pressed against his ear. "Yes, William, I understand the delicacy of the situation," he said to his longtime lawyer, "but we need concrete information about that orphanage. Something's not right there." On the other end of the line, William sighed. "John, you're stirring up a hornet's nest. State institutions are notoriously difficult to investigate, but I have some contacts in the social services department. I'll see what I can find out discreetly." After hanging up, John leaned back in his chair, his mind filled with worries. His gaze drifted to a photo on the wall, himself, much younger, receiving a philanthropy award. The irony wasn't lost on him. For all his wealth and influence, he still felt powerless against the bureaucracy and secrecy surrounding the adoption system. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Emma, the most assertive of the triplets, entered hesitantly. "Mr. John? Sorry to bother you, but we were wondering if there's any news." John smiled gently, indicating a chair. "Actually, I'm waiting on some information." "Emma, I know it's hard, but I need you and your sisters to be completely honest with me. The more we know, the better we can handle the situation." Emma nodded, her eyes revealing a mix of fear and determination. "I understand. What do you want to know?" "Tell me more about the routine at the orphanage. Details that may seem insignificant could be crucial." Emma took a deep breath, her gaze distant as if reliving painful memories. It was like a prison, Mr. John. We woke up at 5 a.m., no matter the age, cold showers, even in winter. Meals were scarce and often spoiled." She paused, visibly struggling with her emotions. "But the worst were the punishments. Mrs. Harker, the director, she liked to separate us. She'd put one of us in isolation for days, without proper food. Said it was to teach us independence." John felt his heart tighten. "Emma, that's clear abuse. Why didn't anyone report it?" "Some tried," Emma replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But Mrs. Harker had connections. Inspections were always announced in advance. Everything was staged to look perfect." At that moment, John's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was Detective Michael. "Mr. Matthews?" Michael's voice sounded tense. "I got some information off the record. St. Mary's Orphanage has a history of filed complaints, nothing that led to concrete action, but the pattern is troubling." John felt a mixture of anger and validation. "What else, Michael?" "There's been high staff turnover in recent years. Many left citing irreconcilable differences with the management, and there are rumors of fund misappropriation. The call continued for a few more minutes, with Michael providing crucial details that painted a grim picture of the orphanage. After hanging up, John turned to Emma, who watched him anxiously. "Emma, what you and your sisters told me, it's being corroborated. But we need more. Would you be comfortable talking to a psychologist? Someone who can officially document your experiences?" Emma hesitated a moment before nodding. "If it helps prevent other kids from going through what we did, yes, we'll do it." In the following weeks, John's mansion transformed into an unofficial investigation center. Child trauma psychologists interviewed the triplets, meticulously documenting their accounts. With Michael's discreet help, John contacted former orphanage staff members, many willing to speak anonymously. One afternoon, Olivia and Ava joined John and Emma in the study. Olivia, usually more reserved, surprised everyone with her frankness. "There was a room," she began, her voice almost a whisper. "In the basement. Mrs. Harker called it the reflection room. But it was a place of torture." Ava, visibly trembling, continued. "We stayed there for hours, sometimes days. No light, no proper food. We could hear other children's screams." John felt nauseated. "My God," he murmured. "How could this go on for so long?" Emma, assuming her protective role, answered, "Fear, Mr. John. We were all orphans, with no one to defend us, and those who tried, well, the consequences were severe." John's determination only grew with each new revelation. He spent sleepless nights reviewing documents, connecting clues, building a solid case against St. Mary's Orphanage and its corrupt administration. One morning, about a month after starting the investigation, John received a call that would change everything. It was William, his lawyer. "John, we did it." William's voice was brimming with restrained excitement. "A former accountant from the orphanage contacted us. He has concrete evidence of embezzlement, forged reports, and, John, this could bring down the entire system." John felt a wave of relief and determination. "Excellent work, William. Prepare everything. We're taking this to the proper authorities immediately." After hanging up, John gathered the triplets in the living room. Looking at their faces, which had become so important to him in such a short time, he felt a mixture of pride and protectiveness. "Girls," he began, his voice firm but gentle, "we have concrete evidence now. What you went through, what you suffered, it will not go unpunished. But the road ahead won't be easy. There will be official investigations, possibly trials. Are you prepared for that?" The three looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. It was Ava, surprisingly, who spoke first. "Mr. John," her voice was soft but determined, "we've been through so much, but here, with you, for the first time in years, we feel safe. If we can stop other children from suffering what we did, then yes, we're ready." Emma and Olivia nodded in agreement, their eyes shining with tears and determination. John felt his heart swell with a paternal love he had never experienced before. "Then it's settled," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Together, we'll expose the truth and seek justice. Not just for you, but for every child who's been through that place." In that moment, as the afternoon sun bathed the room in golden light, John and the triplets sealed a silent pact. The path ahead would be hard, full of legal and emotional challenges, but they would face it together, as an unlikely yet united family, determined to turn their suffering into a catalyst for positive change. The journey to uncover the dark past of St. Mary's Orphanage was only beginning. But with each revelation, with each small victory, a hope for a better future grew. And for John, Emma, Olivia, and Ava, that hope was all they needed to move forward. The clock in John Matthew's living room read 8:30 p.m. when he finally gathered the courage to have a conversation he had been postponing for days. The triplets, Emma, Olivia, and Ava, sat on the sofa, their faces a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. John settled into the armchair opposite them, his expression serious. "Girls," he began, his voice soft but firm, "we need to talk about something important." Emma, always the spokesperson, straightened. "What is it, Mr. John? Did something happen with the investigation?" John shook his head. "No, the investigation is progressing. But there's something that's been bothering me since we met." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Why didn't you seek official help when you ran away from the orphanage?" The silence that followed was heavy. The triplets exchanged nervous glances, tension palpable in the air. Olivia, usually quieter, spoke first. "Mr. John, you don't understand. We tried before." John leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean, Olivia?" Ava, the youngest, continued, her voice almost a whisper. "Once, right after we got to the orphanage, we tried telling a social worker about the mistreatment, but," Emma completed, her tone bitter, "Mrs. Harker found out. She punished us severely and convinced the social worker we were troublesome and lying." John felt his heart sink. "My God, girls, I'm so sorry you went through that. But still, running and living on the streets, you didn't think about the risks." That's when Emma, usually strong and composed, broke down. Tears started streaming down her face. "So of course we thought about it," she exclaimed, voice choked. "But the fear of being separated was greater than anything else." Olivia hugged her sister, continuing the explanation. "Mr. John, we promised our mother on her deathbed that we would always stay together. At the orphanage, they constantly threatened to separate us. It was unbearable." Ava, tears in her eyes, added, "We preferred to face hunger and cold together, rather than the terror of being split up and sent back to that horrible place." John stood, moving to sit beside the girls. In a paternal gesture that surprised even himself, he wrapped his arms around them. "I understand now," he said softly. "Child, you did what you thought necessary to survive and remain together. But I want you to know you're not alone in this fight anymore." The triplets nestled into John's embrace, years of fear and distrust beginning to melt under the warmth of his compassion. After a few moments, John pulled back gently, looking into each of their eyes. "However, we need to face reality. What we've done, what we're doing, isn't exactly legal. There are risks involved." Emma wiped her tears, her determination returning. "What kind of risks, Mr. John?" John sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Well, technically, I could be accused of kidnapping. You're still under state guardianship. And there's a risk that if they find out you're here, they might force you back into the system." Panic was visible on the triplets' faces. Ava grabbed Olivia's hand, who moved closer to Emma. "But," John continued, his voice firm, "I want you to know I won't let that happen. I'll do everything in my power to keep you together and safe." "How?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. John stood up, walking to a window. The full moon illuminated the mansion's garden, creating long, mysterious shadows. "I'm going to file for temporary guardianship," he said, turning to face them. "It won't be easy. There will be hearings, investigations, many questions. But with the evidence we're gathering about the orphanage, we have a chance." Emma got up and approached John. "Mr. John, why are you doing all this for us? You barely know us." John smiled softly, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Because sometimes life gives us opportunities to make a difference. You three reminded me what truly matters. Family, protection, love, things I neglected in my pursuit of success." Olivia and Ava joined them, forming a small circle. "But what if it doesn't work?" Ava asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Then we'll fight," John replied firmly. "We'll use every resource we have. And if, in the worst case, we must face the system legally, we'll do it together. I won't give up on you." John's words hung in the air, heavy with promise and determination. The triplets looked at each other, a silent conversation passing among them. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice choked with emotion. "Mr. John, when we fled the orphanage, we thought we were alone in the world, that no one would ever truly care about us." She paused, tears shining in her eyes. "You proved us wrong. No matter what happens from here, we're grateful." John felt his own heart fill with emotion. "You girls are incredible," he said, "brave, smart, and loyal. It will be an honor to fight for and alongside you." In that moment, something changed in their dynamic. What began as a charitable act on Christmas Eve had become something deeper, more significant. They were no longer just a benefactor and 3 runaway girls. They were a family in formation, united by extraordinary circumstances and a mutual commitment to protect one another. As the night wore on, John and the triplets remained in the room, talking, planning, and for the first time in a long time for all of them, dreaming of a better future. The road ahead would be hard, full of legal and emotional obstacles, but now they would face it together, strengthened by the trust and unconditional love they had found in one another. The mansion, once a symbol of John's loneliness, now pulsed with new life and purpose. And while the stars shone outside, 4 hearts beat in unison, united by the promise of a new beginning. John Matthews's study buzzed with activity that Thursday morning. John himself sat behind his imposing oak desk, while William Donovan, his longtime lawyer, occupied one of the chairs before him. Detective Michael Lawson completed the trio, standing by the window, his solemn demeanor reflecting the gravity of the situation. "William," John began, leaning forward, "we need a legal way to keep the girls here and, at the same time, expose what happened at that orphanage." William adjusted his glasses, leafing through a stack of documents. "John, I won't lie. We're dealing with an extremely delicate case here. Technically, you're sheltering minors under state guardianship. This could be interpreted as kidnapping." John felt a tightness in his chest, but before he could respond, Michael intervened. "It's true, but we must consider the exceptional circumstances. The allegations against the orphanage are grave and well-founded." William nodded, thoughtful. "Right, so our first step should be to file for temporary guardianship for John. That will give legitimacy to the girls staying here while we investigate the orphanage." "What about the evidence we've collected?" John asked. "The girls' testimonies, the former employees' accounts?" Michael approached the desk. "All of it will be crucial. I'll initiate an official investigation into St. Mary's Orphanage. With the information we already have, I can justify a thorough search of the premises. But what if they try to cover everything up?" Concern was evident in John's voice. William gave a slight smile. "That's where our legal strategy comes in. We'll file a civil suit against the orphanage, citing negligence and abuse. That gives us the right to request documents and testimonies under oath." John leaned back in his chair, absorbing the information. "And the girls? How do we ensure they're not separated or sent back?" Michael exchanged a look with William before answering. "I'll recommend that they remain under your guardianship during the investigation." "John, given your record and reputation, and considering the circumstances, I believe a judge will agree," William added. "We'll also argue that separating the triplets would be harmful to their emotional well-being, especially considering the trauma they've already endured." John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. That's good. But what about public exposure? "I don't want the girls to face more stress." "I agree," said Michael. "We'll keep their identities protected. In the media, they'll just be referred to as the young victims." William began outlining a plan on his notepad. "All right, so our course of action. First, file for temporary guardianship for John. Second, initiate a civil action against the orphanage. Third, cooperate with the official investigation led by Detective Lawson." John nodded, feeling more confident. "And what about Mrs. Harker and those responsible for the abuses?" Michael's expression hardened. "With the evidence we have, there will be criminal consequences. Child abuse, neglect, possibly even fraud, depending on what we find about the fund misappropriation." "Good," said John, his voice filled with determination. "They must pay for what they did." William raised a cautionary hand. "John, I understand your anger, but we must be careful. We can't appear vengeful. Our priority should be the girls' safety and well-being." John took a deep breath, calming himself. "You're right, of course. What else can we do to protect them?" "Well," Michael began, "it would help to have professional psychological evaluations. That won't just strengthen our case legally, but also ensure the girls receive the emotional support they need." William agreed. "Excellent idea. John, do you know a therapist specializing in child trauma?" John thought for a moment. "Actually, yes. Dr. Elena Rodriguez. She has an excellent reputation in the field. Perfect, said William, taking more notes. We'll arrange regular sessions for the triplets. As the meeting continued, the three men refined their plan, discussing every detail and possible obstacle. John felt a mixture of determination and anxiety building within him. The road ahead would be tough, but he was ready to fight. After 2 hours of intense discussion, they finally had a solid course of action. William put away his documents, preparing to leave. "John Hastai," he said seriously, "I want you to be prepared. This will not be easy. There will be resistance, bureaucracy, possibly even threats. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" John stood, his stance firm and resolute. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life, William. Those girls trusted me. I will not fail them." Michael smiled, extending a hand to John. "I'm on your side in this, Mr. Matthews. What you're doing is important. It may change many lives." As the three men said their goodbyes, John felt a wave of gratitude. He was not alone in this fight. With William and Michael by his side, and with the strength and courage of the triplets, he knew they had a real chance to achieve justice. Looking through his study window, John saw Emma, Olivia, and Ava in the garden, laughing as they played with fallen leaves. The sight filled his heart with renewed determination. No matter what lay ahead, he would do everything possible to protect those young women and ensure no other child suffered as they had. The path ahead would be challenging, but John Matthews was ready to face it, one step at a time, certain that they were on the right side of history. The shrill ring of the telephone echoed through John Matthews' mansion, shattering the tranquility of Sunday morning. John, who had been in the kitchen preparing breakfast with the triplets, frowned at the sight of William's name on the caller ID. "William, what's wrong?" John asked, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to alarm the girls. "John, we have a problem." William's voice sounded tense. "The Social Services Department is questioning the legality of your temporary guardianship. They claim the process was rushed and didn't follow all the necessary protocols." John felt his stomach sink. What does that mean for the girl? For now, nothing immediate. But they're pushing for an emergency hearing to reassess the situation. After hanging up, John turned to find 3 pairs of anxious eyes watching him. Emma, always perceptive, spoke first. "Something wrong, Mr. John?" John hesitated, but chose honesty. "There are some legal complications coming up, but don't worry, we'll handle it." The following weeks turned into a whirlwind of activities. John and William spent hours in meetings with social workers, judges, and bureaucrats, trying to navigate the legal labyrinth threatening to separate the triplets. Meanwhile, the local media began to sniff out the story. Sensationalist headlines started appearing: "Millionaire shelters mysterious triplets," "Act of charity or something more sinister," "Scandal at St. Mary's orphanage," "What's being hidden?" The privacy John had cherished was being invaded. Reporters began lurking around the mansion, trying to snap photos of the triplets or extract statements from staff. One afternoon, as John returned from yet another stressful meeting, he was ambushed by a group of journalists at his property's entrance. "Mr. Matthews, is it true you're illegally sheltering runaway minors? Rumor has it you have personal ties to St. Mary's orphanage. Any comment?" John, exhausted and frustrated, only muttered, "No comment," before rushing inside. Inside the mansion, tension was palpable. The triplets, confined for their own safety, began feeling like prisoners again. "Mr. John," Olivia approached him one evening, her voice trembling. Maybe it would be better if we gave ourselves up. We don't want to cause you more trouble." John felt his heart ache. "No way," he said firmly. "I promise to protect you, and that's what I'm going to do." But doubts persisted. Emma, always the protector, began questioning if they had done the right thing by trusting John. What if he had ulterior motives? What if all this attention made their situation worse? Tensions peaked when Detective Lawson appeared at the mansion, accompanied by 2 social workers. "Mr. Matthews Mott," he began, his tone formal and distant, "we're here to reassess the current situation with the young women." John felt a wave of betrayal. "Michael, I thought you were on our side," the detective sighed. "John, I am, but there are protocols that need to be followed." My superiors are questioning my impartiality in this case." While the social workers interviewed the triplets separately, John felt powerless. Everything he'd fought for in recent weeks seemed to be crumbling. Emma, Olivia, and Ava faced their own dilemma during the interviews. How much should they reveal? Could they trust John fully, or should they protect some of their darkest secrets from the orphanage's time? After hours of questioning, the social workers reconvened with John and Detective Lawson. "Mr. Matthews," one of them began, her voice neutral, "while we acknowledge your good intentions, there are serious concerns about the legality and suitability of this situation." John felt panic rising. "What exactly does that mean?" Detective Lawson intervened. "It means there's a real possibility the girls may be removed from your custody, John. At least temporarily, until a deeper investigation is conducted." Just then, the triplets entered the room, their faces pale with fear. Ava ran to John, clinging to him as if her life depended on it. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't separate us, don't send us back." The scene moved even the toughest social workers. John hugged Ava protectively, while Emma and Olivia positioned themselves at his side, forming a united front. "Look," said John, his voice filled with emotion. "I know there are protocols and laws to follow, but I ask you to look beyond the bureaucracy. These girls have endured unimaginable trauma. They finally found a place where they feel safe. Separating us now would be cruel and potentially devastating." Detective Lawson, visibly moved, spoke. "Perhaps we can reach a compromise. What if we keep the girls under Mr. Matthews' guardianship, but with regular supervision and mandatory psychological evaluations?" The social workers exchanged looks, considering the proposal. After a tense moment, the eldest of them nodded slowly. "We can recommend that to the judge," she said. "But Mr. Matthews, understand you'll be under intense scrutiny. Any sign of impropriety or negligence—" "I understand completely," John interrupted. "I'll do whatever it takes to ensure these young women's well-being." As the officials prepared to leave, Emma approached John, her voice low but determined. "Mr. John, there are things we haven't told you about the orphanage, things we were afraid to reveal." John looked into her eyes, seeing the weight of the secret she carried. "It's all right, Emma. When you're ready, I'll be here to listen. No judgments." That night, after the storm had passed, John gathered with the triplets in the living room. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "Girls," he began, his voice gentle, "I know the last few days have been hard. You probably have doubts and fears. But I want you to know, no matter what happens, we're in this together. I'll fight for you until the end." Olivia, usually more reserved, surprised everyone by speaking. "Mr. John, we'll fight for you too. You gave us a chance when no one else would. We trust you." Olivia's words seemed to dissipate the last lingering haze of doubt among them. In that moment, despite the obstacles they still faced, John and the triplets felt they had truly become a family. An unlikely family, forged through adversity, but united by trust and unconditional love. As the night wore on, they stayed together, sharing stories, fears, and hopes. And although the future remained uncertain, there was one unshakable certainty. They would face whatever came, together. Rain fell softly outside John Matthews' mansion, creating a steady rhythm against the windows. Inside, in the cozy study, John sat in his leather armchair, flipping through an old photo album. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the yellowed pages. A gentle knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, quickly closing the album. Emma, Olivia, and Ava entered, followed by Detective Michael Lawson. The triplets wore expressions of curiosity and apprehension. "Mr. John," Emma began, "Detective Michael said you wanted to tell us something important." John nodded slowly, indicating they all sit down. He exchanged a meaningful look with Michael before beginning. "Girls," John said, his voice huskier than usual, "there's something about my past you need to know. Something I've never told anyone before." The triplets looked at each other, confused. Ava, the most sensitive, immediately sensed the tension in the air. "Are you all right, Mr. John?" John gave a sad smile. Yes, Ava, it's just not easy to talk about. He took a deep breath before continuing. You know I grew up poor, that I built my fortune from scratch. But what you don't know is that I also spent part of my childhood in an orphanage. The revelation dropped like a bomb in the room. The triplets were speechless, while Michael, who already knew, maintained a supportive silence. But how? Olivia asked, always pragmatic. You never mentioned this before. John opened the photo album again, turning it so they could see. The image showed a skinny boy with sad eyes, wearing clothes too worn out for his size. This is me at 10, John explained. My parents died in a car accident. I had no other relatives, so I was sent to St. Francis Orphanage. Emma leaned forward, studying the photo carefully. How long were you there? 3 years, John replied, his voice heavy with emotion. Thanks to 3 long years until I was adopted by an elderly couple. They were the hardest years of my life. Ava, tears in her eyes, asked softly, Was it like our orphanage? John hesitated before answering. In many ways, yes. There was neglect, sometimes abuse. We never had enough to eat. Our clothes were always old and torn. But the worst was the loneliness, the feeling that no one in the world cared about us. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. Olivia finally broke it, her voice trembling with contained anger. Why didn't you tell us this before? All this time, we could have trusted you more from the start. John lowered his head, guilt evident in his expression. I know, Olivia, and I'm sorry I didn't share it sooner. The truth is, I spent decades trying to forget that part of my life. I built this persona of a successful philanthropist, but deep down, I'm still that scared boy from the orphanage. Emma, always a leader, stood abruptly. Her voice was a mix of hurt and understanding. Mr. John, we understand why you hid this, but we trusted you with our deepest secrets. Didn't you trust us enough to do the same? The tension in the room was palpable. John looked devastated, the triplets clearly shaken, and Michael watched with growing concern. Sensing the moment's fragility, the detective intervened. Girls, he began gently, I know you're hurt and confused, but think for a moment. John spent his entire life trying to overcome that trauma. Sharing this with you is an act of immense courage and trust. Michael's words seemed to have a calming effect. The triplets exchanged looks, a silent conversation passing among them. John, voice choked, continued, When I met you that Christmas Eve, something inside me connected instantly. I saw myself in your frightened eyes, that determination to survive against all odds. But I was so focused on helping you that I didn't realize how much my own past was influencing my actions. Ava, always empathetic, was the first to move. She approached John and, to everyone's surprise, hugged him tightly. Thank you for telling us, Mr. John, she whispered. It must have been very hard. Ava's gesture seemed to break a last barrier. Emma and Olivia joined the embrace, forming a circle of support around John. I'm sorry I didn't trust you sooner, John said, tears rolling down his cheeks. You deserve to know the whole truth about me. Emma pulled back slightly, looking John in the eye. We understand now, Mr. John. And it explains a lot. Why you care so much, why you fight so fiercely for us. Olivia, ever cautious, added, It doesn't change the fact that you saved us, that you gave us a home, safety. John smiled through tears. You don't understand. You saved me too. You gave me a purpose, a family. Something I haven't had in so long. Michael, watching with a smile, commented, I think this proves what I always suspected. You were meant to find each other, to help one another heal old wounds. The following hours were spent with John, sharing more about his childhood, the difficulties he faced, and how he overcame his past to become the man he was today. The triplets, in turn, opened up further, revealing fears and hopes they had kept hidden. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the room changed. What began as a painful revelation turned into a moment of deep connection and mutual understanding. When they finally prepared to leave, John looked at the triplets and Michael with a new light in his eyes. Thank you, he said simply, for listening, for understanding, for being as my family. Emma, speaking for all, replied, And thank you for trusting us, Mr. John. for showing us that we're not alone in this journey. As they left the study, there was a palpable feeling that something fundamental had changed. The secrets revealed had not weakened their bonds, but strengthened them. John and the triplets now shared not only a present and a future, but also a past of overcoming hardship. Michael, last to leave, placed a hand on John's shoulder. "You did the right thing, John. This will change everything for the better." John nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the challenges ahead were still immense, but now, more than ever, he was certain that together, he, Emma, Olivia, and Ava could face anything. The rain outside had ceased, and through the window, John could see the first stars appear in the night sky. A new chapter was beginning, not just for the triplets, but for him as well. A chapter of healing, hope, and above all, family. The family court was packed that Thursday morning. John Matthews, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, sat rigidly beside his lawyer, William Donovan. Across the aisle, the triplets, Emma, Olivia, and Ava, tried to maintain composure, their eyes revealing a blend of fear and determination. The judge's gavel struck, silencing the murmurs. "This session to address the guardianship case of the Pearson minors is now open," announced Judge Harriet Thompson, a middle-aged woman with penetrating eyes. William stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, we are here today to request that guardianship of the young women Emma, Olivia, and Ava Pearson be officially granted to Mr. John Matthews." The state's attorney, a thin man in glasses named Robert Green, intervened swiftly. "Your Honor, the state vehemently opposes this request. Mr. Matthews has no familial relation to the minors, and their temporary custody was granted under questionable circumstances." John felt his heart race. He knew this would be a tough battle, but he was determined not to give up on the girls. Judge Thompson peered over her glasses. "Mr. Matthews, please approach." John rose, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze. "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Matthews, are you aware of the legal and personal implications of assuming guardianship of 3 teenagers with no blood relation?" John nodded firmly. "Yes, Your Honor. I am fully aware and prepared to take on that responsibility." "And what motivates you to do this?" the judge asked, her voice neutral but her eyes curious. John took a deep breath before answering. "Your Honor, when I met Emma, Olivia, and Ava, I saw 3 courageous young women who had faced unimaginable hardships. They needed not just a roof, but someone who genuinely cared about them. And I saw myself in them." A murmur rippled through the room. John continued, his voice gaining strength. "I too spent part of my childhood in an orphanage. I know what it's like to feel abandoned by the system. These girls deserve more, and I'm willing to give them the support and love they need." John's revelation about his past seemed to captivate everyone's attention. Judge Thompson, visibly impressed, nodded slowly. It was then that Detective Michael Lawson asked permission to speak. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to present some relevant information." With permission granted, Michael presented a detailed report on St. Mary's Orphanage's conditions, revealing systematic neglect and even indications of abuse. The accusations made by the Pearson sisters are not isolated. "Our investigation has uncovered a troubling pattern of mistreatment and neglect." The state's attorney tried to object, claiming the information was irrelevant to the guardianship case, but Judge Thompson silenced him with a gesture. "This is extremely relevant, Mr. Green. If these young women were subjected to such conditions, it certainly influences our decision about their future." Emma, the eldest of the triplets, asked to speak. With a nod from the judge, she rose, her posture reflecting maturity beyond her years. "To Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite a slight tremor, "I know that in the eyes of the law we're just 3 more orphans, but we're more than that. We're sisters, bonded not just by blood, but by everything we faced together." Olivia continued, her voice soft but determined. "Mr. John offered us more than a shelter. He gave us hope, showed us we can trust again." Ava, usually quieter, surprised everyone with her eloquence. "For the first time since we lost our mother, we feel safe, loved. Please, don't separate us. Don't take away the only family we have left." The courtroom fell silent after the triplets' testimony. Judge Thompson removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose thoughtfully. Mr. Green, she addressed the state's attorney, given what we've heard today, especially the revelations about the orphanage's conditions, does the state maintain its position? The attorney hesitated, clearly shaken by the revelations and emotional testimonies. Your Honor, the state acknowledges that exceptional circumstances may require exceptional measures. Judge Thompson nodded, a slight smile forming on her lips. Very well, considering all the evidence presented, the testimonies heard, and most importantly, the well-being of the Pearson girls, I am inclined to grant guardianship to Mr. Matthews. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the courtroom. John felt tears fill his eyes as the triplets embraced each other, barely containing their emotion. However, the judge continued, this grant will be subject to regular visits from social workers and periodic evaluations. Mr. Matthews, do you understand the responsibility you're undertaking? John stood, his voice filled with emotion but firm in his conviction. Yes, Your Honor. I understand and fully accept this responsibility. With a final strike of the gavel, Judge Thompson announced, by this decree, I grant guardianship of Emma, Olivia, and Ava Pearson to Mr. John Matthews. May this decision bring stability and happiness to this new family. As the courtroom erupted in a mixture of applause and tears of joy, John found himself enveloped in a group hug by the triplets. Michael and William approached, their faces reflecting relief and the satisfaction of a hard-won victory. We did it, John whispered, looking at the girls with a mix of pride and paternal love. We're officially a family. Leaving the courthouse, John knew this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But in that moment, with Emma, Olivia, and Ava by his side, he felt invincible. Together, they had faced the system and won. And together, they would face anything the future might hold. John Matthews' mansion brimmed with joy and relief. Colorful balloons decorated the grand hall, and the aroma of a delicious dinner prepared by Mrs. Thompson filled the air. John, Emma, Olivia, and Ava were gathered with a small group of close friends, including Detective Michael Lawson and lawyer William Donovan, celebrating the court decision that officially made John the triplets' guardian. Our toast, announced John, raising his glass, to our new family and to the bright future that awaits us. The clinking of glasses echoed through the hall, accompanied by smiles and words of congratulations. The triplets, dressed in new outfits, chosen especially for the occasion, seemed to radiate happiness. Emma, ever the spokesperson, addressed the guests. We'd like to thank all of you who supported us on this journey, especially Mr. John Chi, who risked everything for us, Olivia added, her voice soft but firm. For the first time in a long while, we feel truly at home. Ava, the shyest, surprised everyone by saying, and we promise to do our best to be the kind of daughters Mr. John could have always wished for. Emotion was palpable in the room. John felt tears welling up, overwhelmed by how far they'd come. It was in this moment of pure joy that John's phone rang. Frowning at the unknown number, he excused himself and stepped away to answer. Hello? Mr. Matthews? A deep, unfamiliar voice spoke on the other end. I hope I'm not interrupting your little celebration. A chill ran down John's spine. Guys, who is this? Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that we have urgent business to discuss regarding your new wards. John's blood froze. What are you talking about? Their mother, Mr. Matthews. She owed us a considerable sum. And now, well, let's say the debt has passed on to her daughters. John struggled to keep composure, aware of the worried looks he was starting to get from the guests. That's impossible. There's no record of any debts in their names. The voice laughed, cold and humorless. Oh, Mr. Matthews, not all debts are official, you know. Mrs. Pearson needed money desperately for her cancer treatments. We provided. Now it's time to collect. This is absurd, John hissed, trying to keep his voice low. They're just children. Children with an inherited legacy of problems, apparently. You have 48 hours to contact us with a payment proposal. Otherwise, the threat hung in the air before the call abruptly ended. John stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, feeling as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. When he turned, he saw Michael watching him intently. John? The detective's voice was full of concern. What's going on? Breathing deeply, John made a discreet gesture for Michael to follow him to the study. Once there, he quickly recounted the call's content. Michael listened carefully, his face hardening with each word. This is serious, John, very serious. We need to act cautiously. What are we going to do? John asked, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I can't let anything happen to the girls. They've been through too much already. First, Michael said firmly, we need to tell them. They have the right to know. John nodded reluctantly. You're right, but how do we protect them? We have options, Michael replied, his professional tone masking his own worry. We could get them into a witness protection program or... No, John interrupted. I won't hide them away. They finally have a home, a family. I can't take that from them now, Michael sighed. I understand, John, but we must think of their safety first. At that moment, a soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Emma, Olivia, and Ava entered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Mr. John? Emma asked hesitantly. Is everything all right? John exchanged a glance with Michael before turning to the girls. Sit down, please. We have something important to discuss. In the following minutes, John, with Michael's help, explained the situation to the triplets. He watched with a heavy heart as their expressions shifted from confusion to fear and, finally, to a mix of guilt and despair. This is our fault, Ava whispered, tears rolling down her face. We brought this danger to you, Mr. John. John immediately knelt before her, holding her hands. No, Ava, none of this is your fault. Your mother did what she thought she had to do to survive, to care for you. And now it's my turn to protect you. Olivia, ever practical, asked, What are we going to do? We don't have the money to pay this debt. Leave that to me, John said firmly. I'll handle it. Emma, grasping the gravity of the situation, looked directly into John's eyes. Mr. John, you can't put yourself in danger because of us. Maybe we should just give ourselves up. Absolutely not, John replied, his voice charged with emotion. You are my family now, and family protects family, no matter the cost. Michael, who had watched the scene silently, finally spoke. John, we need a plan. Something that doesn't put anyone at unnecessary risk. John stood, a fierce determination shining in his eyes. You're right, Michael. I have an idea. It won't be easy, and it certainly won't be entirely legal, but it's our best chance. The triplets exchanged worried glances, a mixture of fear and trust in their looks. Emma, speaking for them all, said, Whatever it is, Mr. John, we're with you together. John nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also unshakable resolve. He looked at Michael, who understood the silent request for help. All right, said the detective, sighing. Let's hear this plan. But John, whatever it is, remember, we must be extremely careful. As the night went on, the celebration downstairs continued, unaware of the drama unfolding in the study. John, the triplets, and Michael pored over maps and documents, devising a bold and dangerous plan. The shadow of the past had reached their present, threatening the future they had fought so hard for. But John was determined. He would protect his new family no matter the cost. The true test of their union was just beginning, and they would face it together, as a family. Tension was palpable in the mansion's living room. John, Detective Michael Lawson, and the triplets, Emma, Olivia, and Ava, gathered around a table covered with floor plans, documents, and scribbled notes. So it's decided, John said, his voice full of determination. We'll meet them at that old warehouse by the docks. It's isolated enough to avoid unwanted witnesses, but also gives us escape routes if needed. Michael nodded, though worry clouded his expression. John, are you sure about this? We're dealing with dangerous criminals. Maybe we should involve the authorities officially. John shook his head. We can't risk it. If we bring in the police, they might get scared and vanish. Or worse, try something desperate against the girls. Emma, who had listened carefully, spoke up. Mr. John, we want to be part of this. It's our fight too. Olivia and Ava agreed, their eyes reflecting a mix of fear and resolve. John hesitated, his protective instinct clashing with his respect for their courage. Girls, it's too dangerous. I can't put you in harm's way. But we're already in harm's way, argued Olivia. This debt, this danger, it's part of our mother's legacy. We need to face it. After a long discussion, it was decided that the triplets would stay in a car nearby with a direct communication system to John and Michael. They could hear everything but remain at a safe distance. The following days were a blur of preparations. John mobilized his resources, gathering a substantial amount of money and preparing documents that could be used as collateral. Michael, in turn, discreetly organized a support team strategically positioned around the meeting site. On the night of the confrontation, the air crackled with tension. John adjusted the bulletproof vest hidden under his suit, while Michael checked his firearm one last time. "Remember," John said to the triplets, his voice firm but gentle, "at the first sign of real danger, you leave immediately. No arguments." The girls nodded solemnly, their hands clasped in mutual support. The abandoned warehouse cast long shadows under the moonlight. John and Michael entered, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. It didn't take long for three figures to emerge from the darkness. "Mr. Matthews," said the man in the middle, his voice the same as on the phone. "I'm glad you decided to be reasonable." John stepped forward, maintaining composure. "I'm here to negotiate. I want to settle this once and for all." The leader gestured, and one of his henchmen approached with a folder. "Here's documentation of the debt. As you can see, it's quite substantial." John examined the papers, his heart racing at the amount. It was more than he imagined. Even with his fortune, it would be a significant blow. "I'm prepared to pay the debt," said John, his voice firm. "But on one condition, this ends the matter. The girls stay out of it forever." The leader smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Business is business, Mr. Matthews. But maybe we can reach a more mutually beneficial agreement." It was then that John noticed something familiar about the third man, who had remained in the shadows. As he moved into the light, John felt his blood run cold. "Frank!" The surprise in his voice was palpable. "Frank Donovan!" The man stepped forward, a crooked smile on his weathered face. "Hello, Johnny boy. Long time no see." Michael, tense, looked between them. "John, who is he?" John swallowed hard. "Frank was... He was one of the older kids at the orphanage where I grew up. He used to protect us from bullies." Frank laughed bitterly. "Yes, I protected you. And look where it got me. While you became a wealthy philanthropist, I had to make tough choices." The revelation hung in the air, laden with implications. John felt a swirl of emotions, shock, sadness, and a twinge of guilt. "Frank," John began softly, "I didn't know. Why didn't you ever reach out to me?" "And say what, John?" "Hey, remember me. I need help because I got involved with the mob." Frank shook his head. "No, I chose my path, just as you chose yours." The group's leader, impatient, interrupted. "Very touching, but we're here for business. So, Mr. Matthews, what's your offer?" John, still shaken by the revelation, took a deep breath. "Here's my proposal. I pay the debt in full. But in return, I want Frank to come work for me, a chance for him to start over." The offer took everyone by surprise. Frank looked at John, a mix of distrust and hope in his eyes. "Why would you do that?" Frank asked, his voice gruff with emotion. "Because you once gave me a chance," John replied. "It's time I return the favor." After tense negotiations, an agreement was reached. John would pay the debt. Frank would leave the criminal organization to work at John's foundation, and the triplets would be free of any future threats. When it was all settled and the criminals left, John and Michael exited the warehouse, exhausted but relieved. The triplets ran to them, wrapping John in a tight hug. "Is it over?" Ava asked, her voice trembling. John smiled, hugging them back. "Yes, dear, it's over. You're safe now." As they drove home, a sense of relief and unity hovered over the group. They had faced danger together and emerged stronger. John looked in the rearview mirror, seeing the triplets asleep in the back seat, and then at Frank, who followed in another car. Past and present had collided unexpectedly, but from that collision arose a new chance for redemption and renewal. Under the moonlight guiding them home, John felt deep gratitude. His improbable family had overcome another obstacle, and the future, though still uncertain, seemed brighter than ever. John Matthews' mansion glowed with Christmas lights, the scent of fresh pine and cinnamon filling the air. It was Christmas Eve again, exactly 1 year after that fateful night that changed so many lives. In the living room, around a crackling fireplace, John, the triplets, now 19, and Detective Michael Lawson sat, cups of hot chocolate in their hands and smiles on their faces. Hard to believe it's been a year, John reflected, his eyes shining with emotion. It feels like only yesterday I found you three in that city square. Emma smiled, snuggling deeper into the sofa. A year that changed everything for us, Mr. John. Look at us now. Indeed, the changes were evident in each of them. Emma, always a leader, had enrolled in law school, determined to fight for the rights of disadvantaged children. Olivia had discovered a passion for psychology, focusing on childhood trauma. And Ava, the quietest of the three, surprised everyone by revealing an extraordinary talent for art, her paintings now receiving recognition in local galleries. John, in turn, looked years younger. The sparkle in his eyes and the constant smile were proof of the joy the triplets had brought to his life. You gave me a purpose, he said, looking fondly at the girls. More than that, you gave me a family. Michael nodded, raising his cup in a silent toast. The detective, who had become a close friend and a paternal figure to the triplets, smiled. It's amazing how a simple act of kindness can trigger so many positive changes. The conversation drifted naturally to the events of the past year. John talked about the foundation he had created, inspired by his experience with the triplets. The New Beginnings Foundation has already helped dozens of vulnerable young people, he explained proudly. Tice and Frank has been an invaluable addition to the team. Mentioning Frank brought smiles to all. The former criminal had become a valuable mentor at the foundation, his own story of redemption inspiring many. What about those men? Ava asked hesitantly, referring to the criminals who had threatened them. Michael leaned forward, his expression serious but reassuring. They're out of the picture permanently. The investigation we started led to the dismantling of their entire organization. You're safe now, forever. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. It was as if the last weight had finally been lifted from their shoulders. John then stood, walking to a nearby cabinet. Girls, there's something I'd like to share with you. He returned with an ornate box. I found this among the belongings we recovered from your mother's apartment. The triplets leaned forward, curious and emotional. Inside the box were photos, letters and small keepsakes, fragments of their mother's life. I thought we might arrange a small memorial for her, John suggested gently, to honor her memory and everything she sacrificed for you. Silent tears streamed down the triplets' cheeks as they examined the items. Memories of their mother, long suppressed by grief, resurfaced with full force. She'd be so proud of you, Olivia said, her voice choked with emotion. Proud to see how much we've grown, how much we've overcome. John placed a comforting hand on Olivia's shoulder. She is proud, I'm sure. And wherever she is, she must be grateful knowing you're safe and loved. As they arranged the photos and keepsakes, the triplets began sharing childhood stories, precious moments with their mother, overshadowed by the painful years that followed. John and Michael listened quietly, their hearts filling with every shared memory. As the evening wore on, the conversation naturally turned to the future. For the first time in their lives, the triplets allowed themselves to dream big. I want to become a human rights lawyer, Emma declared, to fight for those who have no voice, like we once didn't. Olivia smiled, her eyes shining with determination. And I want to help children overcome their traumas. I know from experience how important that is. Ava, holding one of her sketches, spoke softly. I want to use my art to inspire hope, to show that even out of the darkest situations, beauty can emerge. John felt his chest swell with pride. You three are extraordinary. And I'll be here to support you in every step of the journey. Michael stood, moving to the window. Outside, snow had started to fall softly, creating a postcard-perfect scene. You know, he began, his voice thoughtful, in all my years as a detective, I've seen the darkest side of humanity. But what I witnessed with you this year restored my faith in people. John joined him at the window, watching the snowflakes dance in the air. It's incredible, isn't it? How one simple act of kindness can set off a chain reaction of events that change lives. The triplets approached, forming a semicircle around the two men. Emma spoke, her voice filled with emotion. Mr. John, that Christmas Eve night, you didn't just offer us food, you offered us hope, a chance to start over. Olivia continued, you showed us that there are still good people in the world, people willing to take risks for strangers. Ava, tears in her eyes, finished, you gave us a family, and there is no greater gift than that. John felt his own eyes fill with tears. He opened his arms, and the triplets immediately enveloped him in a collective hug. Michael, smiling, joined in. In that moment, as the snow fell outside and the warmth of love and gratitude embraced them, John understood the true meaning of Christmas. It wasn't the presents or the decorations, but love, compassion, and the ability to make a difference in someone's life. "So Merry Christmas, my family," John whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Merry Christmas," the triplets and Michael replied in unison. As the clock struck midnight, officially announcing Christmas, John Matthews' mansion radiated love and hope. An unlikely family, forged through adversity and united by the power of a single act of kindness, looked to the future with full hearts and smiling faces. And outside, in the sleeping city, snowflakes continued to fall, covering the world in a pure white blanket, as if nature itself celebrated the rebirth and hope that this night represented.